I review a lot of bad movies and TV shows, not specifically because I want to make reviews about that sort of content, but rather the unfortunate reality that the vast majority of new movies and shows are objectively bad for a variety of reasons. With that comes certain levels of expectation. I often know that characters and story are not going to be properly consistent with established canon, and that specific agendas by these show creators will most often take priority over the actual story itself. But this episode of the Obiwan series goes quite a bit beyond the normal garbage. To me, it looks like the show creators went out of their way to be deliberately disrespectful to George Lucas. Not to say that Lucas didn't have a few missteps here and there when he was creating Star Wars, but ultimately he managed to build one of the most interesting and beloved mythos of the modern era. To see the outright disrespect towards his creation through retcons and character destruction is honestly quite infuriating. Without exaggeration, the content of this episode is on par with the dumpster fire known as The Last Jedi, because as hard as it is to believe, somehow the creators of this show managed to make Darth Vader look like an incompetent moron. Obi-Wan is bad. Episode 3. We begin with Reva speaking to Darth Vader about what happened with Obi-Wan and the Grand Inquisitor, but Vader doesn't really care about the Grand Inquisitor, he's only interested in tracking down Obi-Wan. He tells her that if she's able to capture him, that she will be granted the position of a new Grand Inquisitor. Obi-Wan and Leia arrive on a new planet via the transport shuttle they had stowed away on. They sneak away from the landing area and we discover that this place is yet another desert planet. Except this one is a different kind of desert, whereas Tatooine and Jakku are mostly rolling sand dunes, this one looks a lot more like Nevada. But make no mistake, it's definitely still a desert. I simply cannot comprehend the fixation that Disney has with making most of their planets deserts or just completely empty. I find your lack of creativity disturbing and also quite pathetic.
Congratulations, you're a failure.
Reva is trying to bully the other Inquisitors only to be smacked around by Wong. He wants to be the new Grand Inquisitor as well, but reluctantly gives in to Reva as she says the order she has comes directly from Darth Vader. So they send out several probes to planets where the automated transport system could have been going. And I have to ask, why? The Inquisitors know exactly where and when the shuttle left. It would have been extremely easy for them to find out who owns that transport bay and then find out where it was going. The Inquisitors could have done all of this in less than an hour without even leaving the planet. It simply doesn't make any sense for them to rely on these kinds of probes to hopefully find Obi-Wan, except the writers just want to include it because, hey, nostalgia. Also, keep in mind that these kinds of probes are not used to find individual people. They're used to find enemy starships or bases on distant planets. A single one of these probes trying to search a planet for one person would take at least several months or longer. By that point, Obi-Wan would have been long gone.
Bye-bye then.
Obi-Wan and Leia are wandering around and come across an alien driving a small transport vehicle. Obi-Wan tells Leia not to speak, but of course she just completely ignores him. She tells the driver some stupid story, and he agrees to take both Obi-Wan and Leia to a nearby starport. I think this is a good time to bring up something about Leia. The character is very, very annoying. I realize that someone this young does tend to do that sort of thing, but in this series, it always seems to be at the expense of Obi-Wan, making him look dumb or otherwise incompetent. And of course, all of this stems from Disney's idiotic philosophy that requires female characters to always be better than their male counterparts. This situation just makes it look even more absurd when you have an actual child somehow proving to be more capable than a Jedi Master in a variety of situations.
You're a man when I tell you you're a man.
As they continue down the road, the driver stops to pick up a group of stormtroopers, and surprise! These stormtroopers just so happen to be looking for a rogue Jedi, and as you would expect, this is going to be a very lame and predictable scene where Obi-Wan and Leia try not to stand out and make the stormtroopers suspicious. Of course, again, it's Obi-Wan who screws up and uses the wrong name for Leia instead of using the fake one that they had created with the story that they've been using. However, they're able to quickly smooth over the situation with a couple of ridiculously unbelievable lies, and soon after the stormtroopers dismount further down the road. But don't worry, it gets worse. As I mentioned in a previous video, talking about the Jedi at this point in time is not a very smart thing to do as it draws a lot of unwanted attention. The alien driving the transport is a strong supporter of the Empire, and there was just a bunch of stormtroopers that were looking for a Jedi, so talking about the Jedi is not a very good thing to do. Yet for some stupid reason, Obi-Wan begins telling Leia about what it means to be a Jedi and all of his own experiences joining the Jedi Order.
What good are you? Do you have a brain?
This wouldn't be a big deal if they had been talking about it when they were just walking along together, but now they're sitting in the back of a vehicle with the driver only about 3 feet away, and they are talking at a normal level. There is absolutely no way that the driver wouldn't have overheard every single word of this conversation. I am astonished that the show creators have such glaring lack of awareness about what is actually happening in these scenes. Just because the camera is zoomed in on Obi-Wan and Leia doesn't mean the alien driver, who is 3 feet away, simply stops existing. The transport now arrives at a checkpoint, and the driver gets out and tells the stormtroopers there that they should be careful because he thinks the guy in the back of the vehicle is suspicious, which is a bunch of bullshit because he absolutely overheard Obi-Wan talking about how he became a Jedi. It's not a question about whether or not he's suspicious. He should have just flat out told the stormtroopers, hey, the dude in the back of this vehicle admitted to being a Jedi. But instead, the scene sets up a phony moment of tension when Obi-Wan gets off the back of the transport, and suddenly one of those probe droids shows up at the exact location of the checkpoint at the exact moment that Obi-Wan was getting off the back of the transport.
At this time of year, at this time of day, in this part of the country...
As it starts scanning Obi-Wan, he shoots it with a blaster and then begins fighting the stormtroopers. Then Obi-Wan does the incredibly brave thing of using the alien driver as a human shield.
Why would they do this?
Let me say that again. Disney wants you to believe that the Honorable Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi used a defenseless, unarmed man as a human shield. Are you fucking kidding me? It would be one thing if he had gone to the dark side, but he's still a Jedi, and this is one of the most non-Jedi actions I've ever seen. And whether it's with Marvel characters in the MCU or Jedi in Star Wars, Disney just doesn't seem to have the slightest fucking clue about what a hero is supposed to be and how they're supposed to act. But it gets even dumber. With all the stormtroopers taken out, Obi-Wan runs up to the checkpoint, which is made of powerful lasers, and he can't quite figure out how to shut them off, so he decides to shoot the controls and hope that it will deactivate the lasers. Now, I want you to take a very close look at this image right here and tell me, what do you think Obi-Wan should have done? If your answer is, walk around the lasers, you fucking moron, then congratulations, you're more intelligent than the writers on this show. The lasers are very obviously there to prevent vehicles from going through, as any person can just simply walk around them. Now, it might make sense for Obi-Wan to want to disable these lasers if he had intended on using the vehicle, but he doesn't, because after the lasers go down, he and Leia simply start running further down the road.
Not a great plan.
As stupidly hilarious as this situation is, the exact same thing is actually going to happen again later in the episode with Darth Vader, and it's even more ridiculous than what we just saw. Suddenly, another vehicle approaches and a bunch of stormtroopers get out, but they're betrayed by the female officer among them, who turns out to be Ilaria Sand. She shoots all the stormtroopers, and I mean, really, they shouldn't have been surprised. After all, look what she did to the Martells.
I don't know, do you laugh or do you cry?
Ilaria tells Obi-Wan that she was meant to meet him when he first arrived, but she wasn't able to get there. Now she's going to help him and Leia get off the planet. They head into a town where she hides Obi-Wan and Leia in a secret room within one of the buildings. She then explains that she works for an organization that sneaks people off planets when they're in danger from the Empire. There's another thing about this scene that I want to point out because of how ridiculous it is, and it's also kind of a pet peeve of mine. When the Sand Snake was putting on her blaster, she tells Leia that she wears it on the other side in order for a faster draw. So basically, if you're right-handed, you holster it on the left, and vice versa. This is obviously coming from writers who have no experience whatsoever with any kind of firearm or competitive shooting.
Go ahead, skin it. Skin that smoke wagon and see what happens.
What she's doing is known as a cross draw, and it's objectively slower than a strong side draw. The reason for this is because when you draw on the strong side, you grab the blaster and you bring it up all in one motion. For a cross draw, let's say you're right-handed, you would need to bring your arm up and cross it over your body to your left, grab the blaster, and then move it back over to the right before you can take aim. And it's slower because your arm has greater travel distance. I bring this up because while it might seem like a small thing, I have the overwhelming suspicion that it's going to come up later in the series where somehow the Sand Snake is going to be going up against someone who's also really fast, but she somehow wins because she has this super amazing technique of cross draw, which is, wouldn't actually work like that. Anyways, they're probably trying to set up something and it's just going to be dumb when it happens.
I said throw down, boy.
Suddenly, Obi-Wan looks like he's having a panic attack, and we see it's because of the arrival of the Inquisitors and Darth Vader, who Obi-Wan is able to sense through the Force. At the same time, Darth Vader senses the presence of Obi-Wan, and this is where the character destruction of Darth Vader starts in this episode. As Darth Vader is going through the town, he uses the Force to move large objects out of the way to reveal who's hiding behind them, and of course, all of them happen to be just innocent people from the town. Darth Vader begins indiscriminately killing every single person he sees. And this is the scene where all of the Disney shills and the consumers all go, "Oh my god, it's so terrifying to see Darth Vader. Oh, he's so amazing. Oh, it's great to have." Except the problem is that this is not Darth Vader. This is not how Darth Vader behaves. Yes, Darth Vader will take out anybody he needs to, and he won't hesitate to do it, but he does it in a very cold and calculated way. If Vader sees someone as a potential problem, he immediately eliminates that problem, but he never just randomly goes around killing people just for the heck of it. That is not who Darth Vader is, and what he's doing right now in this episode is entirely inconsistent with all of the established canon for Darth Vader. The fact of the matter is, in this scene, Darth Vader is not acting like Darth Vader. Instead, he's acting like Kylo Ren. After all, Kylo Ren is the discount budget version of Darth Vader that was puked up for the sequel trilogy. He is the type of character that will act emotionally, that will have these rage outbursts when he gets mad something doesn't go his way. That is how Kylo Ren behaves. That is not how Darth Vader behaves.
You don't understand, or you couldn't be bothered to do your own basic research.
The Sand Snake takes Leia through the secret tunnel that will lead to the starport. However, Obi-Wan goes out a side door with the hope of being able to distract Vader and the others. Except instead of trying to get the attention of anyone, Obi-Wan just kind of runs off by himself, but luckily for him, there's a huge amount of plot convenience that allows Darth Vader to essentially teleport out into the middle of the desert, standing right in front of Obi-Wan.
It's very convenient.
Very convenient.
There's been a bunch of stupid stuff in this episode already, but what's about to happen for the rest of the episode is truly awful. First and foremost, I want to point out that yet again, Disney Star Wars is not canon. It is poorly made, overpriced fan fiction that, ironically, is not even made by fans of Star Wars. George Lucas was very adamant about the fact that Obi-Wan and Anakin never saw each other and absolutely never fought each other between the time of Anakin's injury on Mustafar during the Revenge of the Sith and their rematch on the Death Star in A New Hope. This is straight from the guy who made the entire mythos. If he said it didn't happen, then it didn't happen.
This is canon. This is set in stone. These are facts.
In Episode 2, Disney decided to throw away their own canon when they killed off the Grand Inquisitor, and now they're trying to destroy the canon that was created by George Lucas himself. The sheer arrogance of the show creators to try and retcon something that George Lucas had set in stone is beyond the pale. But even as abhorrent as that is, it's going to get even worse because in the next few minutes, not only is Obi-Wan going to look like a miserable coward, but even Darth Vader is going to be reduced to a pathetic, incompetent moron in favor of, you guessed it, a smarter woman character. It would be one thing if it had been an established female character like Padme or Princess Leia, or whoever else that got the better of Darth Vader. Obviously, those wouldn't work in this particular situation, but I think you get the idea. But to have a completely brand new, utterly unknown character make Darth Vader look like an idiot and get the better of him is simply ridiculous. So let's get into what happens. Obi-Wan and Darth Vader begin fighting, which makes Obi-Wan look weak and cowardly. In the meantime, the Sand Snake in the tunnel decides that she needs to go and help Obi-Wan and tells Leia to continue on alone. Obi-Wan continues to get his ass kicked until he's finally thrown to the ground using a force push. A large container of some kind of fuel has spilled onto the ground during the battle, and Vader uses his lightsaber to ignite it. He then uses the Force to drag Obi-Wan through the fire as a similar kind of punishment for what happened to him. And it would almost give them credit for this scene, except for the fact that George Lucas explicitly said they never fought. After making Obi-Wan suffer for a short while, Vader uses the Force to extinguish all the fire. He then instructs the stormtroopers to go and capture Obi-Wan and bring him onto the ship. However, before they can do this, the Sand Snake shoots another container, causing the fire to rise up again, and she also instructs her droid to go and pick up Obi-Wan and bring him to safety. And this is where it gets truly stupid, because during all this, Darth Vader is just standing on the other side of the fire, looking like a complete fucking idiot as he lets the droid very, and I mean very slowly, carry Obi-Wan away.
Nobody ever wanted to see that shit.
First of all, not even 10 seconds ago, Vader used the Force to put out the fire. I have to ask, is this like some sort of old school magic system where you can only cast a spell a certain number of times a day? Because otherwise, he should have been able to just use the Force to extinguish the fire a second time. This shouldn't have been even an issue for him. Or another possibility would be Vader using the Force to lift Obi-Wan off the ground, or just, you wouldn't even have to lift him, you could just drag him on the ground through the fire again, and bring him over to the side with the stormtroopers. During the episode, we saw Vader picking up people with the Force and throwing stuff around, and he also did this to Obi-Wan not even 20 seconds ago during their fight. But for the sake of argument, let's say that Vader has overmaxed his Force-using credit card and that he can't do either of those two things. He could still simply walk through the fire completely unharmed. Remember, we saw that the Vader suit is capable of withstanding blasters, so the idea that he would be stopped by a somewhat large barbecue pit is fucking laughable. And even if Vader didn't want to have to walk through it himself, he could have sent the stormtroopers to simply run through it. It's only about 10 or 15 feet at most, and while their armor is not as good as him, they definitely could have just sprinted through it and they would have been fine. But it's even more simple than that, because the truth of the matter is that neither Vader nor the stormtroopers would have had to actually walk through the fire in order to get to Obi-Wan. As you can very clearly see in this image, the fire only extends about 10 feet in all directions. Any one of those stormtroopers could have taken a few steps to the left, climbed on top of the sandhill on either side of the fire, and easily been able to get over to where Obi-Wan was.
That's what turns me on about you, your attention to detail.
It's the stupid laser barrier thing all over again, and as dumb as this is, I'm willing to bet that the show creators actually realized how stupid this is when they were editing it in post, because they decided to add an extra bit of dialogue from one of the stormtroopers who actually shouts out, "There's no way around," which you can clearly see is a bunch of bullshit. And while all this is happening, Ririva decides to inspect one of the buildings in the town, and as you would guess, it happens to be the exact one that the Sand Snake was using. Once inside, Ririva somehow effortlessly manages to find the entrance to the secret room, but inside that secret room is also the entrance to the secret tunnel, which Ririva also manages to effortlessly discover.
It's absurd.
Nothing with this character is ever earned. Because she checks off the right diversity boxes, she's just given everything that she needs. Now, you might think that she would probably go into the tunnel to see if anyone was in there or to find out where the tunnel leads to, but that's not what she does. Instead, Ririva somehow mysteriously knows the exact location of where the tunnel is going to come out, and she is standing there waiting for Leia as she emerges from the tunnel. There is simply no possible way that Ririva would have known where the tunnel would exit, except of course she does, because she's just that amazing and everything needs to be given to her. This series is absolute trash, and now it is very apparent why Disney was pushing so hard on the defensive before the show even came out, because they knew it was going to be a train wreck. Disney and the show creators spit into the face of George Lucas, hoping that none of us would notice. But we did. And thankfully, that's the end of episode 3.